What is up? Welcome to the Huddle. We're here to give the installer a voice and make sure you are equipped with everything you need to win in this current market environment. For our new listeners, welcome to the team. What's up, fellas?
What's going on?
What's going on, brother?
With
Can
me,
you
as
hear me
always,
okay?
Mr. Daniel and Jose Gonzalez of Grand Rapids, Michigan. Today we have a very special guest, Vince. Vince is out of, tell me where you're from again, Vince.
San Clemente, California.
San Clemente, California. Today's topic for everybody. The market demand for expert witness in flooring. Specifically, Vince is an expert in tile and quality assurance and setting up jobs, getting jobs spec'd. He's got a wealth of knowledge. We really wanted to talk about, you know, everything that it takes. I mean, there's just so much it takes to become an expert installer, but there's another level to this stuff. And we got Vince on to kind of chat through some of that stuff. So, Vince, I'm going to give you the floor and have you tell us a little bit about yourself for our new viewers. This is going to be a sponsorship free video. So, enjoy the content and get live in the chat, ask questions, and let's make Vince feel welcomed. All
Yeah,
right, Vince, tell us a little bit about yourself, sir.
yeah, appreciate
Yeah,
that, Paul. Thanks for having me on. By the way, I love the name The Huddle. So one thing I didn't mention to you, I actually played college football. I was a quarterback, and so the Huddle is a
there you
very
go.
special place for me. So anytime I even hear the words, I got goosebumps. So appreciate
Nice.
that. But I have a long history in the tile and stone industry, going on almost 30 years at this point. I got a C-54 contractor's license from the state of California back in 1998, and I came up in fabrication and installation. So I cut my teeth real early, just getting my hands dirty, and that was a fun ride. But I jumped really quickly into the supply side, so I got into the manufacturing and distribution of ceramic tile, porcelain tile, natural stone, and related products. I've traveled the world over. I've had an international career, which is amazing. So you were talking about how do you gain that experience to even get to an expert level. It might start in installation, but you've got to have that well-rounded. You have to understand product. You have to understand the supply, the logistics, where it's coming from, where it can actually go, where it can be applied, and whatnot. Fast forward in the last decade, I've been working with Oceanside Glass Tile. I'm the president of that company. I'm a shareholder of that company, and we've really taken that. It's a 30-year-old business, right? And when you're in the tile industry or in any industry for that long, you just got to change, right? You got to adapt to the market, and you got to grow. And that's certainly been my role within that business. And then last year, I'm a typical entrepreneur. I got way too many things going on. And this past year, I purchased ceramic tile and stone consultants from the infamous Donato Pompo. Donato, who is the founder of that business back in 2002, he grew an expert witness, forensic tile, flooring, inspection services business. And it's a great business. And him and I have co-wrote many different courses that are online, live courses that we give at Coverings and Total Solutions Plus, these types of trade shows. And we co-wrote a book together that talks about how to get tile and stone products specified, working with architects. And then I've done work for Donato for the last decade. Him and I off and on have worked on expert services together. And then this last year, Donato's just at that point where he just doesn't want to run the business anymore. And so I took over the business starting January 1 and really got a running start, man. It's a killer business. I love being an expert. I love serving on the organizations and the trade organizations. I'm a huge fan of the industry. And I'm just a believer in doing things right and doing my part to pay that forward. So I sit on the Natural Stone Institute's technical committee, TCNA handbook committee. I'm members of NTCA, CTDA. We're on the ASTM C18 committee and the NCA 108 committee. So,
every single
So
operating
is there anything that you don't do?
yeah, it's
Any more
when I
amps?
told you that I do too much. There's a couple other boards that I sit on top of that. I could keep going.
So tell us
Sounds
a
like a
bit
busy man.
about the business that you recently are taking over for Donato and the expert witness side of things. What kind of trainings, when you say you have written a book, is it on that topic specifically?
It's not. So it's a mix of the book, for example, is just on it is and it isn't. So we run through what it takes to actually specify or a written specification for tile or for stone or related products. So for flooring, for example. So everything you need to know to understand how to write a specification. And then ultimately, if you're on the selling side, right? If you're an installer, if you're a distributor or a manufacturer, how do you sell your product then and keep that product specified? Because that's some of the hardest thing that we do is someone likes a product, and how do you hold on to that spec, right? And
Hold on to
actually
the spec,
get it through
yeah.
the end.
Yeah, and so when you're doing the forensic kind of thing where you're serving as an expert witness, you said it's a good business. Can you tell us about that? Like, what does that entail? What do you do there?
Yeah, sure. So it's anything from I'll start off with this because it's an easy way to understand it. Our top client list, you would think that they would be tile companies or even installers. It's actually the insurance companies and it's the law firms that represent these companies. They're our clients, and so there's a couple things that happen. One would be your typical claim, like a water loss, right? A pipe bust and water goes through the house, floods the house. And then the insurance company wants to know, is there damage to the tile or the flooring? And does it need to be replaced or can it be repaired? What's the problem? There's fire loss. Obviously, don't wish that on anybody. Certainly what's happened recently in California. But fire loss is a big deal too. I was recently on a fire loss claim, and just understanding, can that be cleaned? Does the flooring have to be completely replaced? And then we get into a lot of litigated matters, right? So there's a lot of construction defect that happens within tile, whether you're talking about a shower, a floor, whatever it might be. And the general contractor gets involved, the subcontractor gets involved, and you've got homeowner, and none of them are agreeing, right? So then it just goes to litigation. So the attorneys will bring us on to come in as a third party, totally objective. We can come in and assess the situation, write the report on what our findings are, all of which is based on empirical data. So we're measuring things. We're taking everything from slope to moisture readings to you name it. And then we want to access standards, industry standards. Sometimes it's just a standard of practice or standard of care within the industry that we have to fall back on. Other times we can allude directly to the TCNA handbook or to the dimensional stone design manual that the NSI puts out, and we can cite industry guidelines. Did that installer follow proper guidelines? Did they follow the specification? Did they follow the manufacturer's recommendations? And then the last thing we do is around just quality control. So sometimes we get to a point where the recommendation is full replacement, and then whether that's a commercial or residential job, they want to ensure that the new installation goes right. And they need help. So they need someone like us to come in and write the spec, write the installation guideline, and help oversee the installation.
So when you say the
What
installation
what
go
makes
right,
it different? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I just have a quick question. You say right, oversee and make sure the installation goes right. Is that because they just want to be educated on that, or are you going to be their information station, so that way the installer and whoever they have back out is kind of crossing their T's and dotting their I's?
Yeah. So I'd say both, right? Like, people want to be educated. The installer wants to be educated. So sometimes we have the clients that just want to understand better what's going on. Other times they throw their hands up. Like I was just recently on a job. So I like being on the jobs where, just as an example, There's no attorneys involved. There's no insurance company involved. It's just a homeowner and an installer and a general contractor, and they're all trying to just work this out. And they've all thrown their hands up and said, we don't know what the issue is, and we got to get to the root of the issue. And then we need someone else to tell us what the remedy is, right? So sometimes it's just, I want to be educated. I want to understand what's going on. Sometimes it can get really vindictive too. So I never know, to be honest. Like, I never know what I'm walking into. And so we try to get as educated up front as we possibly can. So a lot of my job ends up being research. We got to look over a lot of documents, a lot of photos, and looking up standards and looking up a lot of things before we ever step foot onto a job site.
You guys, what's the difference? How do you differentiate yourself from an inspector? Because it sounds like you do some inspector things, and maybe it is an inspector, but it seems to me that Donato and you guys have done it a little bit different. I mean, sometimes an inspector will serve as an expert witness as well, but that typically is a little bit different. Is there a difference between hiring an inspector and hiring you guys?
Totally. It's a great question. I love that question too, because a lot of times the inspector is there to just go and document, right? So a lot of times what you get from an inspector is just a pure photo report, right? It's just, I know what to look at. I'm going to take a bunch of photos. I'm going to put it in a report and document all of this. You guys have it. There you go. But there's not a whole lot of opinion involved. What we do is much more comprehensive. So if you look at my report versus an inspector's report, they're very different. So we go to a higher level of research. So we're citing industry guidelines versus an inspector might know enough to reference the TCNA handbook, but he's not going to know the specifics and where to look at in the TCNA handbook to actually cite what is the actual standard that's applied here, right? The other thing too is we have a background. Here's what makes me personally different, what makes Donato different. So I've been in the Carrera quarry several times. I've been in the Thassos quarry. I've been in probably a dozen different limestone quarries between France and Portugal and Spain. I've been in other marble quarries. I understand stone at a really high level. So when I go onto a project and I can immediately identify what the product is on the floor, just as an example, or on the wall or whatever the application.
You're like, that was cut out of section 14 out of Mountain 3.
I mean, if you knew how many times, like I can tell you just in the last 6 months, I've been on 3 jobs where you can call me a top expert of the product that was installed. And so when I came back to the client and said, oh yeah, I've been to that quarry. Not only have I been to that quarry, I spent 14 years selling that product. I've actually specified that product on some of the largest jobs in the country. So I know that product like the back of my hand, and they start laughing. And so then when they see my report, when whatever the plaintiff is saying, this product doesn't exist, you can't get it, I have to replace everything, et cetera. And I walk in and say, oh no, you can get that product, no problem. I know exactly where it comes from. I know who to get it from. So that's the difference. An inspector is only going to go in and really just observe. We're going to go way, way deeper than that. And our reports reflect that.
And it sounds like you provide solutions on the backside, not just reporting what may have went wrong or not went wrong, but you're going to provide, hey, how do you rectify the situation in a quality manner? And you and I were kind of chatting before the podcast started that some of that is like you'll come in and do the quality control, write the spec and those types of things to help with quality assurance on the replacement, or even if it's a partial replacement or what have you. But you'll do some of that, like that next step that you don't see inspectors do, which is the remediation of the deal, like how to actually fix it for long-term, quality.
You got it. You said it perfectly. I mean, I just finished up on a project actually locally. This one was in San Diego. We're all over the country. So I got guys, I'm lucky because I've got incredible inspectors. I got 6 of them that are all around the country. And, we're going to Florida, we're going to Tennessee, we're going to Texas. And we do a lot of jobs in California inherently. But I was just on one where that's exactly what I delivered to the client. Was not only did I tell them, they wanted to understand why, right? They needed to understand what was going on and why. And the general contractor, generally, he didn't know. He was like, I need to know. I need to understand what's going on so we don't do this again. And then they wanted a remedy. They wanted to know, okay, well, what's the root? And then how do we fix it? And so we walked in and said, I told them exactly what was going on, why it was going on, and what to do to fix it. And that's huge because
I mean, especially if it went wrong beforehand. And Daniel is a really true expert in sheet vinyl resilient flooring and moisture, and does a lot of training around that. And we always like to sit at the huddle, and I appreciate what you said early on. We do, it's just like a little huddle. We get together once a week and we're talking about the industry's issues, but we also use a lot of the uh, analogies from sports on here. So that's where the name comes from. Believing that building a great team, whether it's on inspection or the actual installation early on, is part of the success of a project. That being said, Daniel, I wanted to tap in on the other flooring side. So I know you don't inspect a lot, but you do a lot of quality control from the terms of when you are training people. What types of, you see, I don't see this type of thing that Vince does in the soft goods world as much. I know you do. Do you do soft goods, or is it just
we do. I have a carpet. While it's not my expertise, I know enough to be dangerous, right? And I've written several reports on that, but I actually have a certified inspector on staff that I do subcontract. And he's been doing that for Donato for a number of years. And recently with me, I've personally been on half a dozen projects with him. Great guy. But yeah, in fact, today, right now, he's on a hardwood inspection. So yeah, we do get involved in that.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
I mean, on the soft good side with us, he's actually Jose is certified in carpet inspections. And then I think with us, it's just the deconstruction of the projects that we have seen failing. And then, I mean, we go to the GC and we're like, hey, this is why this is failing. And then they're like, oh, you mean we can't put marker on the floor if you're installing resilient? Or, oh, we actually have to, do something with this cutback adhesive instead of just trying to go and put a half inch of prep down. It's like, man, that stuff's going to come up regardless of what you do, unless you either get rid of it or I mean, they got 1 part urethanes now that can go over it, but you got to do something. You can't just start patching over it and think that it's going to be covered.
Yeah. I so often, I've had flooring inspections done. I own a commercial floor covering company, and as we were talking earlier on, I also founded Go Carrera. But most of what we find, or what we uh, uh, come across, is there's a lack of training. Not that there's a lack of the ability to train. I think the training entities, most of them have space in their classes, but getting all of the installers, specifically when we're talking about 1099 true subcontractors, it may work for multiple flooring companies. um, Making sure that there's access to training, and that there's a way for them to let me say this: the best way to be successful is to be trained right first. Like, you really got to know what you're
No
doing. So
question.
often these inspections come back and it says there's an installation issue, which I would assume a fairly large portion of what you do falls back into improper installation techniques. We found it. I've served as an expert witness in the past, only brought in for a court case for and I really didn't like it because it was a competitor and I wanted to make sure that I was unbiased in the deal, but it was clear lack of training, lack of knowledge on how to properly install that flooring system.
Yep.
And is that what you find as well in your inspection, in your business, I should say, in your reports? Are you finding that it's lack of quality training, or are you seeing that it's let me ask this: how often do you find a highly certified guy that had an installation problem?
Yeah, almost never. I mean, that's the thing is the guys that are doing it right. I don't know the last time. I mean, I wouldn't be on a job. I mean, they're just not having problems. I mean, you're right. Here's what I would tell you is what we find, primarily in tile and stone. It's never one thing, right? I can't tell you that it's ever just 100% installation. It never is. There's always something else that is potentially going on. And that's what makes tile and stone so complicated, right? Because take stone, for example, not all stones can go in every application, right? And same with ceramic tile versus porcelain versus a mosaic. And then if you've got something that's got a fiberglass mesh on it, if you've got something that is dimensional versus a certain size mosaic to large planks to porcelain slabs, I could go on and on. Like literally, every year the TCNA handbook or the dimensional stone design manual has to be updated because we have to accommodate for these new technologies and these new things. Not to mention the setting materials. I mean, the setting materials have gotten so specific. Take glass tile, for example.
And trowel sizes for different applications.
Yep. Totally.
I mean, it's just, yeah.
The adhesives they're getting amazing. And, you have to, as an installer, you got to keep up with that because you have to understand that you can't just, everybody falls back on, I'm just going to use 254 platinum, right? And that's like the cure all, but you can't use that, for example, on a translucent glass. You can't do that because from batch to batch, the color could be different. And so now it's going to change the color of the way that glass tile looks. And so you have to know that. And these guys, to your point, they're not continuously training themselves and updating themselves on the new technology, the new adhesives, the new products. There's a ton of training out there. The manufacturers are better at it than ever before in the industry, certainly way better than when I started in the industry. So the support level that you're getting from the manufacturers and then also from the trade organizations, manufacturers and the distributors are heavily investing into the trade organizations, NSI, the TCNA, the NTCA, CTDA. All these organizations offer an incredible amount of training, educational courses. So to me, there's no excuse, but I want to add one last component. In California specifically, we have an issue with unlicensed guys. And that's where it also starts, because to get licensed, you actually have to get trained, right? So you have to go through an apprenticeship, or you have to understand how to take that exam, what's going to be on the exam. And so it's going to give you a level of training that's absolutely necessary for you to get into that trade. So at a bare minimum, that's the place to start. And in California, we have a big issue. And a lot of times I'm going on these, smaller residential jobs, and I have to ask the question, was the guy licensed or not?
Yeah. Well, we've had a lot of discussions around licensing on here before. And, if you look at most things that you're licensed to do, the license is required because the resulting damage. And the lack of licensing in flooring, I hypothesize greatly that there's not enough resulting damage that's going to require it across the nation. I mean, you get your pockets where it's there, but I mean, whether it's a driver's license where you could kill somebody because you're driving a 5,000-pound missile, or you're a plumber where if you if you don't know how to plumb and you're plumbing a high rise, the resulting damage is not just that your 50-cent pipe burst, it's all the millions of dollars of damage resulting from it. If you put a bad tile floor in, it's just typically a bad tile floor unless you're getting into shower systems, which, anything to do with water. I think there should be a special license for waterproofing systems in showers. I do think that could get passed, but I don't know how that, that's where when I started Go Career, the whole purpose was like having some score here that you can know that somebody is and that not just an expert person, like I'm a flooring expert or you're a flooring expert, but the homeowner can have an easy to understand guide as to how well that person's skill level is. Where is their skill level? But licensing's been a thing that's been talked about forever, but it's just never caught wind outside California and a few other very sparse spots.
Which is really super weird for me. Is it called the C15?
What's that?
License in California? Is it called the C15?
So it's a C54 is what's required for ceramic, mosaic, tile, slabs. There's a separate masonry license that you can get, but the industry utilizes the C54 license.
Okay, so it categorizes it here. I've got ceramic tile, C54, flooring installer, carpet, vinyl, wood, LVT laminate, C15. So even soft surface is required to carry a license?
Yeah, say that again.
Sorry, can you hear me at all?
Yeah.
You just gotta talk right into it.
Required to carry a license?
Who is?
Soft surface goods.
Surface.
Yeah, so it is. So in the state of California is really interesting that way. So, I think, Paul, you said it perfectly, right? That I'm not sure that for sure other states are not as rigid, maybe New York, but state of California is interesting. So if you're going to perform in any trade, if you're going to perform a job that is over $500 and or requires more than one person, right, you're required to carry the appropriate trade license. So it's true of soft surfaces too. Now, soft surfaces is a different designation, but you're absolutely required to carry it. And then in California, it comes with criminal charges, some of which can be felony. So they have different misdemeanor, but they also have felony charges, believe it or not. So if you're operating, for example, the example would be if you're using someone else's. So Jose, if you have a license, let's say you've got a C54 and I don't, and I contract with Paul under your license, then that's considered fraud, essentially, because I'm using your license and I'm an unlicensed guy, and that can be a felony charge. So California is super serious about it.
Well, we have a comment, and I think this is true on just about anything, but guy says, Jason says he's seen knucklehead licensed tile guys there in Cali, and he's seen superior installers that are not licensed. I think that I wonder what would keep somebody from being licensed if they've taken all the courses to do so. Is it money? Are the licenses expensive, or are they overbearing in some manner?
They're not. You can get it in English and Spanish. You can prepare for it in English and in Spanish. Even courses, the CSLB offers free courses and training to take the exam, but you can pay for courses as well. And it's $150 annually to maintain your license. I've had mine since 1998. Jason's right, though, by the way. So again, just because you can, think of doctors, right? Or a vehicle license, right? With a lot of knuckleheads on the road. Not every doctor should be a doctor, right? So I think the same absolutely goes for tile installation. So I didn't, by any means, just to clarify, say that having a license and getting a license is enough. Paul, I think you said it. Continuous training is absolutely necessary for you to be on the up and up and continue to grow and get better at what you do. There's no question. And as the technology changes with adhesives and product and application and things like that, you've got to stay informed and be able to adapt with that growing market.
I think that's where it's really important, and Daniel can chime in here, but in any of the flooring categories is staying up to date, like we always say getting involved, but understanding the different thin sets or grouts and how to utilize them. I know that there was a hell of a big problem with urethane grouts early on, and there was not enough training on them. Everybody thought they were just so super easy compared to an epoxy that they went and install them, and then they'd have haze everywhere. They couldn't get off their Windex and shit as left and right. They're trying to get eventually it started to solve itself as people got more experience with it. But as a homeowner or a business owner that has that product, I didn't want you to learn on my job. I wanted you to get the training that was necessary. And a lot of times a new product comes out and the training lags behind. It's too far lagging to, you know what I mean?
That's right.
And so a product will come out for a while. Click Floor. I mean, it took Wilson Art out of business in the flooring industry when they came out with their solid core, and the tongues were snapping everywhere. Part of that was not understanding that it's not void of the necessary floor prep. And when those floors were installed on perfectly flat floors, they didn't have that problem. But you start getting that flex and the tongue would break off, and then you had problems throughout a project. And I actually have experience with that myself back in mid 2000s, I'd say. But yeah, it's like the products come out and the training for those products lag enough that there's a pretty high failure or problem rate. I won't say failure, but issues with that new product. But you do have to stay up on it, whether it's new thin sets or you're putting gauge porcelain panels up and what trowels to use. And all of that stuff really, really matters. And that's why here on the Huddle, we're huge proponents of getting trained. I know I was going to tag Daniel in here and Jose to talk about, all of the little tricks and techniques and new things you've seen over the last 10 years in just sheet vinyl and heat welding and cold welding and all these things.
Just the tooling in general. I mean, the things that you can use in order to cut the time of the install down that people just, I've seen trainings where they're still not using this stuff, and it's like, man, you're teaching them with this old stuff, and like things could go just so much better if you just upgrade some tools.
Yeah, and that's same as the new product. Is a new tool goes out, but how to use that thing is sometimes lacking.
Yeah,
Well, I would just argue this is that there's never been an easier way to do it at this point. And let me just give you an example. So several years ago at this point, one of the things that we developed at Oceanside Glass is our mosaic is a paper face mosaic so that you can get 100% contact on the back of the mosaic. It is the better way versus fiberglass mesh. And some guys are resistant to that, even though it's actually an easier installation and you're guaranteed to have bond versus what you deal with fiberglass mesh. So that's not even what I'm getting at. So what we did is on the paper face, we printed installation instructions on the paper face. Then we put a QR code on the paper so that you could download the video that shows you how to install the shit, and they still install it backwards. Like it's insanity. It's insanity. It's like when I get the call, I'm literally like,
you have to include the device too, brother.
You're right, Jose. Hey, next time I'm going to throw it. And by the way,
throw an iPhone in there.
If that wasn't enough, we actually print we print our install guide, and that goes in the with the bill of lading in every.
When you
So-
say they
so they're
install
getting
it upside, are they installing paper down?
Yes.
Still, is that what
Yes.
you're?
And it
I think the
literally
biggest
said-
problem we found with Oceanside Glass, because we've installed it, is the amount of they have to you have to be really cognizant of your trials and trial size, because you can go, if you're not and you're not using the proper trial size, you have a grouted product with thinset at the end of the day.
Sure
And that
do.
has
You
been
sure
that
do.
was we had a
I
problem
just
with
can't get
that
over.
where
I can't
it
get
was
over
pretty
what you
much
said.
grouted with thinset because he used a large notch trowel or larger notch trowel trying to build it out. Well, you don't know what's going on behind there.
Yeah.
You don't see it. That's the harder part. But
It
if you're
is.
using the right trial size, it won't fill your grout joints up.
Yeah.
And like we told our guy back then when that happened, it's been years ago, but like it's better to use a backer board to flush it out. This was an accent, a 1 foot accent in bathrooms on a 12 by 24 tile, right? And so you got a thinner product versus a thicker product, and they tried to float it out with inset as opposed to either pre-floating it with a ledger, like a gauge board, or putting up something that would make that gap up. But yeah, I remember seeing that distinctively, and it was like grouted with thinset. All you can do is take it out. I mean, you're not.
You have no choice at that point. Well, and I'd say this, like, again, with Oceanside Glass, is that we know it's a complicated product to install. Like, we'll never try to argue otherwise, which is why we go to so much trouble to make sure that we make all of our install guides as easily accessible as possible. So the major point that I was trying to make was it's never been easier to access information on how to install this stuff or what tool to use or whether or not the product should even be installed in that application. And it's easy to get the info that you want. In my opinion, there's little to no excuse to not know. I mean, how many times you see, how many YouTube videos have you watched to do some project? I mean,
Yeah.
It's so easy. So don't even look at my install guide. Just go on YouTube.
Well,
I mean-
YouTube is a fantastic place
It
to
is.
get a reference, but it doesn't
We've
give you the
had
hand
you,
skills. Right? Hand skills you have to get with practice.
Yeah.
Information is there though.
Yeah.
I mean, just look at the publications, the trade publications. They're all out there. There's great articles in there. I mean,
There
that's where
are.
I started learning a bunch of stuff, and then you just keep on going from there. But in your case, I mean, you're giving them the instructions 3 times before they even install it. There's no
But
reason.
at the end of the day, that still does not take away from knowing how to do it.
I
It's
agree.
just like when you start talking about, you could watch someone on YouTube do a
Oh.
flat leaf carpet or something, and you ain't gonna be able to just like, you got to have these skills too.
Yeah, and that's I was
you-
talking to someone from a community college was in here last week, and I was telling her, I said, she was asking me about the training, and I said, I like to do more hands-on stuff, especially in the trades, because that's what we do. Like, you're not learning unless you're working with these, because I can explain something to you all day, and until you start doing it, you'll never get it.
I agree.
Yeah, there's a big piece of using your hands, where you start to you can get some knowledge online. Like, our algorithm for Go Career does give credit for online courses, but it's not the same weight in our algorithm as putting your hands on it and then being tested. Those types of deals are so, that's why, like, we do a kind of a Facebook failures or follies or whatever. We'll pull up some YouTubers doing stuff and try to keep it lighthearted, not really trying to dog on anybody, but there's still a reason why there's professional installers. And most of the products, even the DIY products, should be installed by a professional. And we push that a lot, even though it says that, you can do it yourself. You can, probably, Like, can you put two joints
Probably.
together? That part you can probably do. It's all the other crap that goes into a proper installation that really matter to put your hands on it. Angles and cuts. I went to a job today that we're bidding an assisted living, and I kid you not, this LVT was on an angle, but it come to a door jamb that's on a so it's going in at an angle, and they said to hell with it. We're just gonna fill all that with caulking, like this, and so having somebody who's skilled with their hands is still the first requirement. Then you can watch YouTube videos because you also can figure out which ones are BS and which ones can really help you with your install.
And I think what set us apart, like, I mean, even now, is that if I were to get that material, I would get it and then play with it in the warehouse before I even take it on a job site.
Yep, gotta do,
We
mock
just had
it
that
up.
conversation today. We just had it today. Like, nobody knows about this product. It doesn't have legs yet, but I don't want to test it on the job. I don't want to test it with the installers. Let's get our hands wet or get our feet wet here at the shop and do a mock-up.
Well, and that comes a lot from the heat welding world. I don't care what job I've ever been on. That's what I kind of specialized in, was Flash Cove heat weld products. Even if I've welded before, I do not start welding a job until I've ran, practice runs on the product, partially because you never know the different welders and the heating elements and how hot the welder's running. So you got to figure that out. But it's also the product itself. Even if I've installed it thousands of yards of Medentech, I'm still going to run some practice welds and do that for a time. So that's kind of inherent in the resilient world. I think that get you guys out there experimenting with stuff every time you get something new.
That's where you get like the sports analogy from too, right? Where they say, an amateur will do it until they don't get it wrong, but a professional, is that what it is? They'll do it until they get it right, but a professional will do it until they don't get it wrong.
Yeah.
And it's
a big difference.
Certainly the part.
That is with the dynamite right there.
A lot of the we talk about floor prep a lot here because that's the piece that always gets forgotten. And I'm sure in the ceramic tile world, you guys have a similar problem. How many projects, Vince, have you been on where a floor fails, say a tile floor fails, but it wasn't the thin set or the tile, it was the floor prep underneath?
The substrate. Yeah. It's a lot of them. A lot of them have issues with the substrate. Well, we run into a couple of things. One is they're not putting oftentimes the proper crack isolation membranes down on a concrete substrate, for example. Movement joints is probably one of the biggest issues. So that you're going to get that contraction and expansion. You can't avoid it, right? So depending on the area, so if you're not cutting perimeter joints or you're not putting in movement joints and allowing that flex, right? And you got to you can't hard grout it, right? Because that's a cementitious adhesive, grout is, and so there's no flex. So you've got to use a sealant, and you got to allow for movement, and that's one of the biggest issues that occur because you've got a control joint. And I'm primarily talking about concrete substrate, but you got a control joint, and if you're not properly preparing for that, you're going to have cracks. You're going to have issues, And then the other thing that happens is too much thin set. So thin set mortar, is a ton of shrinkage when there's too much of it. So I want to say TCNA handbook says about a 1/4 inch, depending on the application. Some applications only 3/32 of an inch of thin set. So like you were talking about earlier, Paul, you got to build that up. Whatever, if you're talking about a floor, a vertical surface, you got to build that up somehow. Mud, mud set, whatever it is. But point being is like what we run into, which I've run into twice now in the last week, is you got like 3/4 of an inch or an inch of pure thin set. And so
I think that's also just to throw something out there. It's a product again. What's the difference between thin set mortar, medium bed mortar, mud setting? These are things like trying to build a thin set. It's called thin set for a reason. Trying to build that up 3/4 of an inch and it not being a medium bed mortar or something of that nature.
Or a mud bed. Yeah, I mean those are the two. Those are the two to use. I mean that's it. Like you use a medium bed mortar, use a mud bed, and then that's why it's called thin set. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like it's just, I guess it's just not intuitive enough.
Well, it's in the name, but I think it's one of those. It's like a Kleenex. You just start to get it like it's.
Yeah.
It's a mortar, and it can go as thick as you want. We've seen that as
Use
well,
paper towels to
where
blow your nose, brother.
you're building
Use
it up,
paper
and a
towels.
lot of times it never actually cures out properly to that thickness. And natural stone in particular, I've seen where there's holes, like where there's a crack and the product just sinks down, and there's mortar underneath all of it, but it's just got compressed because it never really cured. I mean, there's all kinds of problems when you start trying to use a product that's not really intended for that use case.
Coverage is another issue, right? So you guys have heard that before. So if you're only getting, I think on large format, for example, 80% is required. I mean, really, you want, in most specifications, they're asking for 100%, which I think it's unreasonable. You're never going to get 100% coverage, right? But the TCNA handbook says 95%. So on, a typical tile installation, they want 95% coverage because you need the contact. You got to have the bond, especially if you're going to go vertical. If you're going to go vertical, we're on a lot of projects with exterior veneer and you've got porcelain tile that's falling off the building. And it's really dangerous. It's super risky at that point. And, these guys aren't getting full contact, and you're not getting that bond that you need for that installation to be super tight.
Well, that's where you go to the videos on Facebook and stuff where they're just spot bonding everything.
Yeah, I thought a good thing to bring up would be, we're talking about coverage and DIY and the big push on leveling systems and how often that has caused the failure because they didn't use enough thin set, or they didn't have proper, whether it was not mixed correctly or they went into it too dry or whatever, and they use a leveling system and it pulls it off of the mortar bed. How much of that have you ran across?
Yeah, absolutely. We see that too, and then they're not doing it in the right order, believe it or not. So we see, they don't read the manufacturer's directions on, okay, well, if I'm going to include a crack isolation or anti-fracture membrane, and then I'm going to go self-leveling or whatever it is, right? So we'll, believe it or not, we show up and it's not in the right order, or the two products can't be used with each other. So you got to go, you want to try to stick with a single source manufacturer. You shouldn't mix and match as much as you can help it. So you stick with a single source. Usually if you stick with a single source manufacturer of the setting goods, there's a warranty attached to it. So you always want to, and then you just follow their recommendations in terms of, because they'll explicitly tell you, use this with this adhesive, and they're not reading. I think some of these installers, they're just used to using their regular products, so they're talking to the wrong person or whoever it is, and they're not doing their own diligence to understand what they should be using.
Well, some old timers are used to just a couple of products too, and now you got this plethora of products that are like, which one do I use? And again, getting product knowledge along with your hand skills is,
especially on that hard tile side, right? Because coming from the soft goods side, we're like, all right, I'm using this material, so I'm going to use their adhesive. But on the hard tile side, no one has their own stuff. So it's like, well, what am I going to use? And then what's the system I'm going to use? But like you said, if you all it takes is a little bit of research, and you're like, oh, if If I use this system, I get a 5-year warranty. If I use this one, I'll get a 10-year warranty. If I use this one, it's a lifetime. So it's
You
all
got it.
in how much you want to spend on something. And then when you're bidding, it's a different story, because it's like, what are the
Well, you
other
got
guys
some
going to be
forceful
using?
specs that make you use different products sometimes, and you're like, even when you start talking about writing specifications and stuff, and you were talking about expansion joints earlier, one of the things that you will go to battle with designers with is movement joints. I mean, they'll let you get away with some soft joints, but you start wanting to put a true expansion joint in, and they're like, that's too ugly and for this lobby. And I'm like, well, you got a 60-foot span. We have to put
Gotta
true
put it in.
expansion joints in.
Yep. Yeah, you're 100% right. And by the way, it's the TCNA handbook is very explicit about this, is that it's actually the architect that should specify where the movement joints go and what movement joints to put in. And if it doesn't exist in a specification, then the installer should submit an RFI, right, for understanding where the architect wants the movement joints to go in, right? And it has to go
That's
in.
a good point for the audience. Like, you should lean on the architect and the designer, but specifically the architect, to give you that guidance on where to put the joints. So often we get asked for shop drawings that show where they go, and they want us to decide, and we
Not
can
your
only give them
responsibility.
the and I can't tell you that we haven't just given them, and we have. We try to follow the the guidelines, but often they're like, well, can you move this one over here, because we don't. It's so aesthetics driven
It is.
that that's where the problem comes in. It's like they don't want this there, but that's where it needs to be, because you have an actual building control joint there. I can't like move it 5 foot to the right just because it's going to look better. It has to be where it has to be
Right?
sometimes.
That's when you tell them, you might as well just not put one if you want me to move it there.
Well,
Because of the aesthetics and the performance portion of it, they literally have people have created businesses based off of creating transitions to insert and different ways to use the design aspect. As like we have so many samples here. I mean, we'll probably never use 90% of what we have here, but we have them just in case. It's just it has to be there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe that should be a podcast. Maybe we should talk about that, understanding how to look for it.
An
what to
issue.
look for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is a topic in and of itself, Jose. I think you're totally right. I mean, a couple of things that we've talked about are literal topics in and of themselves that we could probably go on for a while about, but they're all combined. They're all issues. And we run in, I mean, just going back to I think the root of what you were saying, Paul, at the beginning, it is, we run into all of those things, and it's rooted in training. I mean, you can't get away from it, right? And licensing, it certainly is a part of that, but that ongoing training is what's so important to keep up with that. And then, as you brought up something that I heard you say that I thought was astute, is that oftentimes the training is lagging with the technology as it gets released into the industry. So with that said, knowing that's the case, you've got to get with the manufacturer. If you're unsure about a product, or if there's something new that you've heard of, or whatever it is, the manufacturers most have written installation guides. They have specifications. They have the information to provide to you to help you do it right. And then, like Daniel and Jose, you guys were saying, is mock-ups, right? I mean, then you can't just rely on that. You've never done it before. So mock it up, right? That's what you got to do.
So you said
Yeah.
something right there. The manufacturers have that information. They do the training, and we talk all the time about relationships with reps, and that's where it really comes in handy, to where they're just a text or a phone call away, and it's like, hey, man, I got this going on. What do you recommend? And then he quoted a project not too long ago, and then we just had lunch with our Utseen rep today, and then he's like, yeah, this stuff is coming over. It's not even released in the US yet. This is what you can use on that, and I'll get you some.
Yep.
Yeah, and a lot of times we did an exterior system I told you guys about, but we did an exterior system that Ardex came up with, and here in the Midwest, porcelain pavers are pretty popular or gaining popularity, but hardscape guys are installing it like they install flagstones and putting it on gravel beds or putting it on a sand bed and then polymeric sanding it, and the homeowners are expecting that to last about 3 days with polymeric sand. And especially when you start talking about pool decks, we just did a really nice big pool deck with 24 by 48 tile with Ardex's exterior A14 drainage mat system. But they'll go out there with you. We had the Ardex technical guy there with us the entire project, making sure that we're doing the processes. In fact, we had to change on one area to a different system, and so leveraging your technical reps and leveraging those people, that's it. That's just as important when a product comes out, because that was a new product I seen it at a Fuse conference because I'm a member of Fuse, and I was like, that's what I need for this job.
Yeah.
Well, the training for that there's no training for that yet, and making sure that it's done right and that you actually get the drainage you need. And there's a lot that goes into that would take a whole nother podcast, but that's what I think Daniel's saying is like having the relationship with your reps and leveraging them, and also getting involved with the industry and talking to guys like you, Vince, and joining the huddle and listening and learning.
That's it. When you brought up Fuse Alliance, right? And I think that's, being a member of Fuse, or, being a member of NTCA, or, any of those type of organizations, right? The trade organizations are incredible, and they just keep getting better and better with the information they're putting out and the courses and the training that they make available to you. So no, and then you go to Fuse Alliance. I was there as well. And you get to see some of the new product right there firsthand. Like you just said, then next thing you know, you're using it on a project. And so, yeah, you got to, Coverings is coming up next week, right? I mean, it's another place, it's a venue to make sure that you're out in front of all the new trends and any type of new products that are coming out.
Yeah, and I think it's just important for installers to get involved more than just the flooring companies. The guys that are dealing with the architects and the general contractors winning the bids, and then either having their in-house crew do their W-2 employees do it, because we have W-2 installers as well as subcontractors. And those subcontractors, you can't force them to do certain trainings. You can't, it's not the same. And so I encourage all the subs, like, if you are performing work, getting involved and getting trained is like paramount to your success.
Agree. Totally agree.
All right. Well, we've come up at the end of the podcast here, Vince. Thank you so much for joining us. If you'll stay on after we leave the live stream here, I want to thank our audience for getting involved and commenting and asking questions. We didn't get to all of them, but it was a pleasure having you, Vince, and your knowledge. Get involved, guys. Get out there. Vince, do some plugging for your platforms and where people can find you and work with you if they need.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about Oceanside Glass. So that's just glasstile.com. Super simple. And then Ceramic Tile and Stone Consultants, really simple, CTASC.com. And all the information you want. We actually have some free resources on there too, by the way. So there's an FAQ where if you got a lot of questions, we've got a platform where you can ask questions about stuff that's going on. And then certainly that's a great way to get a hold of me if you're looking for quality control services or forensic type services.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today, Vince,
Thanks for
Daniel,
having
and
me.
Jose. Awesome job. Thank you so much. And to our audience, we'll catch you guys next week.
All right. Thanks,
Thank you,
guys.
everyone.